Welcome, women in tech and women in tech supporters, to the Beta in Real Talks, where women talk to women every week about how to empower more women to lead in tech. I'm Carly, aka Delta.
I'm Adriana, aka Leanie, and we are the two hosts of this show and the creators of Beta, the fictional series about how two very different women, Leanie and Delta, learn how to empower each other and lead in the tech industry.
And to support the larger dialogues on women's empowerment in tech and highlight the importance of representation in both entertainment and tech and technology, the two industries that are designing our future, we started a campaign called #BetaIn.
Our mission with Beta In is to change the stories around the who and what is worth investment in the tech industry, because we know that change starts with stories, and we need more women in tech stories.
And so as part of that campaign, we partnered with the amazing Center for Creative Entrepreneurship here in Chicago, who is hosting this show, to kick off an educational and fun talk show called Beta in Real Talks.
In every episode, we're going to bring you amazing women and tech leaders who are going to share their perspectives, their challenges, tell us their stories, and help guide you through their experiences in various aspects and different sectors of the industry.
And this week, we have Jill Griffin on how to align to your understanding mindset, the importance of mindset, and how to align to your goals.
Yes, we're really excited to dive into this. But before we do, we want to introduce you to the two fictional characters, Leanie and Delta, that were inspired by powerhouse women like Jill. So please enjoy our trailer for Beta, the series, and we will be right back.
Oh my God. I hate my job. Just tell them that.
You got me fired.
You got me fired.
You got me fired.
Are you kidding me?
That's me, Leanie. This is Delta. She was my boss.
Exhale. You're good. You're good.
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I think you should be an entrepreneur.
Leanie, do you know what that word means?
I know this is something you've always wanted. Now's the time. And the tech industry is all the rage right now.
80% of businesses fail within the first 18 months.
This is gonna be so exciting.
You are brilliant.
I am?
Yes.
What did I say?
I don't want you getting involved in my personal life. You know nothing about me.
I'm your friend.
We are not friends.
A flower never competes with a flower beside it. It just blooms.
What about goggles that recognize images?
Like Google goggles?
Exactly. Oh, I see why that's a problem.
I never realized that we were so much on the same page.
We're totally in the same book.
So we're going worldwide, baby.
Delta, I was gonna show you that we could.
Hello, hi Jill.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you.
Great. How you guys doing?
Good. Thanks for joining us. We're super, super excited that you're here today. I'm like giddy. I almost can't speak in the introduction. I was like, take a breath.
Actually, before we dive right into introductions and stuff, we're just going to let everybody know who's watching live that might have questions.
Okay.
That we will have some time at the end for questions. So go ahead and put those into the chat throughout, and we will address them once we're finished with the dialogue. Great. And with that, Jill, do you mind just giving us a little introduction to who you are, what you do?
Sure. I'm Jill Griffin. I call myself a mindful career coach. I have been coaching individuals professionally for about 3 years in the career space, about 10 years overall within life coaching. I come from a background of digital tech, out of advertising agencies and media agencies, and the power of story has been such a part of my career as being a content professional within those spaces. So when we all got to hook up here, I was really excited about it because, again, I believe so much in the power of story.
Amazing. And well, we'll get to that. I'm going to hold my questions. I got to hold my own questions. Adri, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. You just triggered, I was just thinking so much today about stories even more in depth, and just how someone said to me, stories not only define our culture, they shape them. And so that's what's so exciting about talking to people like you, and with what we're trying to do with Beta is have a story that can help shape the future of stories that are being seen in the media. So with that being said, with the stories that are out there, are there specific stories that influenced or impacted you in your youth, or in your journey in tech, or in your journey as a coach along the way?
I mean, I think if I go back to as a youth and a child, there are a few children's books that have always been impactful. And it's funny, when I was thinking about what those favorite books are, they all have the similar theme, and that's love. So one being The Velveteen Rabbit, right, which parlays really nicely today into being a coach, because it's all about being seen, mattering, and being loved. The other one that I also love is The Giving Tree. Shel Silverstein, I believe is how you his last name. And if you remember that, my parents actually had the LP, so I used to listen to the story, read in his voice, and just again, this image of this tree just being completely selfless and helping somebody else get nurtured, and that giving, again, a story of love. And then, of course, the last one for me is one that's called Leo the Late Bloomer. And it's about, a little guy who doesn't bloom until he blooms. He's not ready until he's ready. And how does he bloom? With his mother's love and support. And I think it's been such a theme to me that everybody needs the perfect amount of support and stretch. And when we have support and stretch is when we're able to bloom and move forward. And again, it's all underpinned with love. So for me, those are some of the most compelling stories that I think really shaped who I am and how I go about my everyday life.
I love that.
I know, a little mushy, but
But no, it's never mushy. That's what's so can be so annoying sometimes, is that it's even considered mushy, because it's like, that's everything. It's so important. That's what we should all be talking about all the time.
I read that Michelle Obama calls herself the hugger in chief, and I was like, that's my title.
That's so good.
I think that's really interesting, because even growing up in the same family, my brothers and I need a different amount of love or support, or it's kind of interesting how different people need that stretch and love. I'm a very emotional driven person, and I'm from the South, and anytime I meet someone and I'm inspired, I just want to hug them, and I just want to tell them how much gratitude I have for them, or the things I've learned from them, even total strangers, when I'm like, you've inspired me. But I know, people like my brother or my boyfriend, that would totally freak him out. That's not his communication strategies.
So on your journey, be curious to know what initially brought you into tech, into your first career, because I mean, you've had many career iterations. So I'd love to hear kind of what brought you first into the tech and the media storytelling space, and then this fantastic transition into mindset coaching, and why you decided to go in that direction.
Okay. So I started in the tech space really from a place of before digital was a thing. And it really started from myself and a colleague, Jennifer. We're working in media, and we're kind of tapping out, meaning we were really secure in our roles, in our jobs. We weren't necessarily getting promoted. And there was this thing called the internet that was like starting, and we were trying to figure it out. So I know I'm totally dating myself, but like no wrinkles, right? No wrinkles.
You look great.
You look amazing.
And I remember just focusing on, okay, how do we learn this thing? And we both were also sort of giddy, because it meant that if we learned it and master it, we had so much more agency and autonomy and being able to run something. And yes, we still needed our supervisors for some guidance, but it wouldn't be micro guidance, right? It would be more macro guidance. And that was really what drove me into digital in the first place. And then just over the course of my career within, again, both advertising agencies and media agencies, I love it. I love the possibility of tech. I mean, for me to be around people who are innovating, collaborating towards a common goal, and then anything's possible, because if we can think it, we can create it, and we can make it. Just, I would get my palms sweaty. I'd be like, this is amazing. So I still love media, and I often still consult within the media space. But just as my career was really starting to take off, I was in an accident which resulted in some pretty serious head trauma. And as a result of that, if anyone has been concussed or has had a traumatic brain injury, try showing up every day in the high stress, volatile nature of New York City advertising agency, digital agency, media agency, and you're having a problem thinking, literally thinking and stringing words together. And I didn't tell anybody, right? My family, my doctors, my friends knew, but professionally, I didn't tell people in the beginning because I was afraid that if people knew, it would have been looked upon as like, oh, she won't be able to do this job. We won't give her opportunity. So again, story I told myself, which is really then what became the stories we tell ourselves that may be true, but are they serving us? And how do we think about things differently? And that started getting me really interested in how the mind works and how I get to choose what I think, which then creates what I feel. And then every action we take is either because of how we want to feel or a feeling we're trying to avoid. And that creates our results. And that process really was what led me. First, I did the work. I mean, I became my own first client, right? I did the work on myself. And then now today I get to help so many other people do the work too. And it's one of my greatest joys.
Wow, that's fantastic. So important, but very hard to teach and to coach. I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit about that. When you do work with clients, where you most often see the barriers, because we can know this, but you had a very particular story that also, I find that to be the case, that people kind of hit a moment in their life where they have to face their own mind and what traps them and what empowers them.
Yeah.
So when you work with people, what does that look like? Do you find that most people have gone through that event, or that they're coming to you for other reasons?
I think they're coming to me because it's just about everybody's going to have some level of struggle, right? And whether your struggle is something like mine, which is, the post-concussion syndrome, or whether you're just trying to work within an industry and you're brushing up your skills and there's struggles there. Like, everybody's got a struggle. No one is spared. And how do I know that? Because I don't know anybody that doesn't have some sort of struggle. What I find that people come to is that everybody is either seeking, like, there are probably three clear stories, and that's either something around status, something around money, or something around time. And they're coming either because status, meaning they want to get promoted or they want to get a job, and they're struggling with how to be able to be seen in those opportunities, or to apply for them and to actually get noticed. Time, meaning they're either having wicked time management issues, or they're in this myth of like work-life balance. How does it work? Blah, blah, blah. I can't get it done. Again, it's a choice. Or lastly, it's money, in which things are that are affecting, their personal safety, their personal security, their financial, their wealth. And those tend to be the main things. Now, they could be wrapped in a blanket called like, I don't get along with my boss, right? It's still, at the end of the day, then it still comes down to either money or in that case, or status. And those are the ways that people tend to come to me, in which they like their job, they hate their job. They're noticing that they started in the morning and they were great, but something happened at lunchtime, and now they're on LinkedIn looking for like the jobs board, and they're like, what just happened? Like, everything was fine this morning. And that's where I teach my clients is, again, how to have agency, how to, if we don't choose our thoughts on purpose, we're going to be like a toddler with a knife who's like, ah! And you're like, whoa, stop it. Okay, let's focus. So I teach my clients how to think on purpose. I have a process which I take them through. And it's something that, yes, pen to paper, doing some writing, awesome. But as I always say, like, you're prepping dinner, you're chopping vegetables, everything's fine, and something all of a sudden it's not. You can also take yourself through the mindset process and really dig in and be like, what is that thought creating for me? And is it helpful?
Do you find that thought or the driving emotion behind those actions is fear-based a lot of times, or is it a sense of self-sabotage, almost like a fear of accomplishment, or is it just learning how to control the thought process?
I mean, I think, the human brain basically, it's called the motivational triad, right? This is not a Jillism. This is just what it is, right? So the human brain seeks pleasure, wants to avoid pain, or wants efficiency. So this idea that our brain is always looking for those things. And again, we're not trying to run away from the bear in the cave anymore, but our brain doesn't necessarily know that. So if we're not thinking with our prefrontal cortex, if we're not thinking intentionally, then sort of the party brain in the back takes over, and again, we're like all over the place. So really making sure that most clients are coming from a set of fear in some way, right? Because if you go back to that motivational triad, if you're seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, there's an underlying thought of fear within there. So whether it's fear through, I don't know if I can do it, whether it's self-sabotage, fear, right? If it's imposter syndrome, fear, if it comes from lack or scarcity, like I always say, like there's not enough, this idea of like, there's only so much to go around, and what will go around, I won't get my share. So this like sort of a lack mentality tends to be what people come from. And at least by the time they find me, they're like, help.
So pervasive.
Yeah.
And do you mostly work with founders, entrepreneurs? Like, are you kind of focused on a certain, people with certain job roles, positions in life?
I focus, I would say the bulk of my clientele sits within tech, media, media companies, within that area. But, I also have an elected official, a politician. I have the full gamut. Again, it comes down to people who are saying something's off because I love my job, and then suddenly I hate my job and I don't know what's going on. And like, sometimes something has happened and you're like, ouch, that sucks. I feel bad. I don't like my job. And other times it's not. And that's where it's really the discovery of like, you're being a jerk to yourself. Like, what are you thinking? And like, how do we reset that? And this isn't the work that I do. This isn't a 10-step to positive thinking article, right? It's not like think more positive thoughts, which is
that drives me crazy,
right? Which is like, duh, if I could think more positive, right? So maybe you have one positive thought, and then the second thought, you're back in an unsafe neighborhood. You're like, what just happened? Like, how did that change? And again, it's like understanding your thoughts are here. You want to be here. How do we connect those? And again, through the process of really looking at your brain and kind of finding some like I call them like wiggle thoughts, like bridge thoughts, like if you're here and you want to get there, what's something that can meet in the middle, so that every day you start practicing it, so that little by little your brain catches up and starts to believe it. Because everything that's ever been created in life has started with a thought. Everything. So pick your thoughts wisely, and what do you want to create?
Now, every time I think I know myself, I'm going to have like a little wiggle worm in my brain where I'm like, come on, go from there to there. Let's get over to the other side.
And like, so an example would be, oh my God, I want that job. Oh my God, I'm never going to get that job. Okay. So what's in between? It's possible I could get the job. Maybe I could apply for the job, right? You start to find the space in between I want it, I'm never going to get it. It's possible I could. Why not me? I'm going to apply. It'll be okay. Like, you start to be in that area and you practice that. That's like an example. It's a very simplified example.
Do you find that the people that come to you share very similar, well, obviously they all are in a similar space of seeking something, seeking balance and feeling in alignment. But the personality types, are you surprised that they range, or do they often, are they specifically like an alpha type or a softer type? It's a range.
Yeah. I mean, I have people that are, on-air talent and within the celebrity space. And while their on-air personality is, I would say, very much alpha, their day-to-day personality is more beta, but that's like they put that person on. And in those situations, it's really working on like the imposter and the sabotage. So how they can show up for their audition in grace and excellence and being able to create the result that they want. It doesn't mean that they're going to always create the job or they're going to get the job. It means that they're going to leave it all on the table, so to speak. Like, they're coming and they're not going to walk out of there saying, oh, I wish I did that, right? They're going to come out of there and say, I did the best I possibly can, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And Carly and I talked about this a lot going into beta as we were writing our characters, because we kept trying to assign traits, knowing that I would play Lainey and she would play Delta. And we kept trying to define our characters by these traits. And then we kept finding, oh, we could actually flip roles, and I could play Delta and she could play Lainey, and it would work fine. And just discovering that we all have these traits in all of us. And it's like, which one are you feeding at what time, and which side of you is helpful? Most of the most powerful CEOs and speakers I know behind the scenes are so shy and introverted. It's like they put it all out there, they leave it all there, and then once they come home, it's like a different person. It's always fascinating for me to watch.
I mean, I call myself an extroverted introvert. Most people would think I'm an extrovert, but I actually am much more introverted, but I do get energy from being with other people, doing speaking events, doing being with crowds, right? But then equally, you may not see me from Friday to Sunday, right? because that's my self-care and my recoup time. And I find that is very common with people, that they have two personas, and it's not fake. It's just there are two sides, and which one are you choosing to strengthen at any given time?
On the self-care element, I imagine you would advocate for is so critical and important to being able to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, so as part of the head injury, I became a nutrition coach and a functional nutrition educator because I started to figure out that food can help and heal. So understanding, it's a choice. Again, make a decision. Don't feel guilty, put it in your body, enjoy it. But what happens often is that if we're in a moment of stress and we're not allowing that feeling of whatever that stress or anxiety or anger to come over, and we start to resist it, like, you have to think about resistance like a rubber band, and it's going to smack you back in the face, right? Or a beach ball, you're trying to keep it underwater, it's going to pop up and knock your teeth out if you don't let it flow through you. What often then happens is, it's no surprise to me that a large percentage, almost 65% of my clientele shares that they have some struggle they feel with food, alcohol, over consuming Facebook and social media, over like binging on shows all the time. Because again, we choose to numb out because we're trying to not feel a feeling. And if we allow the feeling, you could still do all those things. You just plan for them in your prefrontal cortex so that you're not susceptible to the binge. You're not susceptible to the urge. You're saying, Friday night, I'm having this, I'm going to eat that, I'm going to do this, and you're doing it intentionally. Again, it's all about intention. I think that's one of the most important things that I've learned in my self-care. It's not about deprivation. It's about allowing myself, hey, it's going to rain on Saturday. I am totally binging on that series, and I'm not going to have any guilt for it, right?
Yeah.
But it's when there's other things I need to be doing and I'm avoiding them. So I choose to sit there and watch 7 episodes. And then, like, I feel like those online streaming services are so judgy. Like they're like, are you still there? Are you still there? And you're like, judgy. You're so judgy.
Also, when they recommend content, when they're like, we noticed you watched this, so we'll recommend this. Sometimes I'm like, 30 you don't know me.
Episodes of.
It's so funny. On the self-care note, I was doing a podcast talk, like whatever, a few weeks ago. And we were trying to expand the conversation on self-care, because so often it's understood as just physical, that it is, exercise and having your diet right. And what you're speaking about, the intention. And I'm like, we have such a superficial understanding of what self-care is, when self-care really is actually the entire journey of life, but also doing that internal reflection. What you're speaking to, and what I talk a lot about too, is the need for having a dialogue with yourself and acknowledging when things feel off. Because sometimes it feels off because, your diet's off, or you ate some ice cream and it didn't do well, you didn't sleep well for a few nights. But if we talk about chronic, if this is something that's lasting for a while, internally something's off. You're not aligned to something. You're not really where you want to be in your life, and you're not showing up in a way that you want to. Yeah. And if we're not having that self-care dialogue I'm like daily. I'm like, I think it's because things happen, life changes, you grow.
I mean, for me, sometimes it's like every meal break, right? Where one of the things that I recommend to clients and anyone who's watching is just write down your thoughts, right? Don't judge them, just write them. Become the watcher of your brain. And you're like, isn't that interesting that that's what I think? And just write them down, right? Yeah. And then it starts to create an awareness. I do some morning exercises. I do morning exercise, but then I do some morning mental exercises where I really think about Who needs me on my A game today? Where do I need to show up? What might knock me off? What do I need to think about? Is there an upcoming meeting that maybe I'm a little nervous about, or do I have a big presentation that I want to think about differently? And I run through the scenario in my head, not the worst case scenario, but I run through the scenario in my head of imagining myself connecting with the audience or connecting with the client, smiles, connecting, authentic feelings. And then it's amazing that when you actually show up, suddenly things feel easy, right? Because you've already run through in your head and you haven't thought about like every worst case disaster scenario, right? And you're thinking
That's
about
so interesting.
your impossibility. You're like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Imagining what's possible versus obstacles. I feel like we're so taught to think about, plan for the worst case. That way you're prepared for the best case. But sometimes envisioning that worst case scenario, it can mess with your thought process. For me, at least, it does. My emotional energy.
Yeah. Well, especially if you don't know where you're going. If you don't have that, let's see if Jill comes back. If you don't have that, that picture of what tomorrow looks like, or where you're going, I feel like it's easier to deal with barriers. If we start with barriers, Carly, rephrase. Like I always say, where do you want to go? And then we can talk about how. But so often I find that everybody wants to jump right into the how first. Like, oh, that's not possible. There's this barrier. That can't work. It's like, we'll deal with that. You can deal with those. But first, do you actually know where you want to go? Because if you don't have that, it makes it very difficult for anything else to happen.
Yeah. What's the solution and the path to the goal versus immediately jumping to the obstacles?
I'm back.
You're back. There we go.
She's back.
One of the things I was going to say, wherever you guys took it, we were talking about possibility, is that every morning I write a possibility goal. That could be working on, a month-long goal, but what's the step I need to take today? It could be a daily goal where, I want to make sure that I get on my Peloton and exercise today, like whatever that is. But I write a possibility goal so that I'm saying today it's possible that blah, 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 blah. Right. And then you start training your brain and then you start showing up for yourself. You're like, oh, that was my possibility goal. I actually did it. Look at that. And I start getting traction into action. So it's, I find it to be super powerful that I often wake up in the morning thinking about the day before's possibility goal. And I'm like, oh, right. That's a great way to be thinking in the morning versus, we're in a very, highly congested news environment, and it's important to stay informed. But at the same time, how do I want to start my day? I want to start my day in possibility before someone else tells me what my day is going to look like by consuming other media. Yeah.
Yep. And question. When you work with leaders, especially founders, but I mean, any leaders, executives on this sort of work, I very much assume and note that the internal alignment, their life quality gets so much better when you start to live your life intentionally. Obviously, as an individual, we get so much stronger.
Yes.
But I'm curious, in your experience and in what you've noticed too, and the feedback that you've gotten, how their leadership has impacted their teams. If their teams have noticed, if you've noticed the company doing better, so that their self-work really does have an impact on the organization's success.
Yeah, it's a great question. Often what I find within leaders is that they are, they're realizing that a couple of things, that like, if I'm not happy, like how can I change the world if I'm not happy?
Right.
Or 15 hours a day, like, or however, some people 20 hours a day, right? So really getting clear on, again, the thoughts, and whether the world is literally the world, or it's, the app community or the technology community you're working in, it's changing your world. It's also understanding that if they're a jerk to themselves and they're kicking their own butt, that harsh internal critic is going to come out to the peers, the colleagues, the staff, right? And no one wants that. And it's going to create the environment. So that shift in mindset that starts at the top is so impactful to increasing the harmony across the entire department, where everyone then starts to feel there's just like an ease. It doesn't mean we're not hustling. It doesn't mean we're not working hard and getting it done and like moving mountains. It just means we're doing it in a culture that it's safe to fail, right?
Yeah.
And we start to look at that failure is the currency and success is what you're buying. So if that's the situation, then how, again, do you show up? So as far as overall profits, I mean, what I hear back from my clients is overall improved relationships, tensions within board of directors where, right, they're all financially obligated to be working together, especially within a startup situation, finding that like issues may still be there, but they're not as charged and tense. People feel more purposeful. Turnover has decreased because people aren't as like, I got to get out of here, right? Because again, they work for a leader that they respect and that they know that a leader, like, it's not about perfection. It's just about understanding like, okay, I could do better and here's how I can do better. And I get to influence my staff to have the same level of flexibility of how they're running their mind while they're at the office during the day. And I know we're not in the office these days, but still, you could still have a passive aggressive Zoom call. Those are,
for sure.
I've heard a lot about those. I'm like, wow.
Oh yeah. And email, I mean, it can almost get a lot worse in the virtual environment because you also add in the fact that people are misinterpreting, it's a lot of emails going out or literally short messages, especially when people are trying to be efficient with time. So things can be,
right.
Yeah.
And the little three sentences that I tell clients and myself is, does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? And does it need to be said by me right now? And when you put that filter on things, sometimes if you're in a tense environment and everyone's fighting for their own point of view, you can think about that. I'm not saying silence your voice. I'm saying, are you adding to a situation or are you detracting from it? And how do you really quickly get clear? Again, everything I talk about is like, how do you bring it back to your internal GPS?
Yes.
How do you bring it back to the alignment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I might have missed this. My internet got a little glitchy, but I think also, Jill, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but knowing that being aligned doesn't mean not meeting resistance or obstacles along the way. It's just learning how to better handle them as they come.
Yeah.
Which I think is an important distinction that oftentimes people that are so misaligned or tense or stressed all the time are like kind of wishy-washy, like dismissive about this kind of work because they're like, oh, these are real problems. And it's like, yes, these are real problems, but learning how to handle them more effectively for your inner health, for your mental health, for the health of those around you.
Relationship health.
Right.
Yeah.
And, my mentor always says, from the training that I have, that like coaching doesn't necessarily feel good, right? Like sometimes it really sucks. But coaching is about doing the work to know that I can experience any thought and emotion and I can process it and I can work through it, right? Versus constantly being the, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, like the high and low. Like it ends up being so erratic. So what happens then is like, if I can process any emotion and work through it, suddenly my self-confidence goes through the roof. Because again, a lot of times our self-confidence is impacted by things that we're afraid of, things that make us anxious, things that make us uncomfortable. And again, if we can process those feelings and being like, okay, this is stressful for me, this is making me anxious, I'm feeling this way, we start to strengthen that self-confidence and know that, as my mentor would say, Jill, the worst thing that can happen to you today is a feeling.
I like that.
Those do terrify a lot of people, though.
They can be
I mean, really, they're like, I don't want feelings. I don't like them.
It's
Those
so
feelings
funny.
just sneak up on you,
It is, and it's so funny, being a very business-oriented person in my coaching training was so interesting because they were so good at feeling and like articulating their feelings. And that was a lot of work for me where like I lived my life between here, right? So over the last 10 years of being a coach, really getting into and like identifying, and sometimes I can't even articulate the feeling, but I know that there's a weird sensation in my stomach. And I'm like, oh, and I find that my clients, the same thing. They're like, what do you mean feeling? And I literally give them a list of feelings. And I'm like, these are feelings. How do you feel? And then they'll tell me a thought. And I'm like, no. I asked you how you felt. And they're like, well, I think. I'm like, no.
Oh my God. It is so
amazing.
hysterical to
It's
hear this,
amazing.
because you forget, like, we literally don't teach humans how to be humans.
We
And so we teach them how to be, we're like, you be a machine that follows all these stories and these things that we tell you and use that brain. And then when you get those feelings, it's like, no, that's bad stuff. We don't pay attention to that. No.
And what I've learned to do that has been life-changing for me is to use the feeling as fuel.
Yes.
Right. So when the feeling is one that I don't prefer to have, I don't really believe feelings are good or bad or negative, right? But if it's an open feeling versus a closed feeling, if it's one I don't want to have, I start to look at what I'm thinking that's creating that. But on the flip side, where I create it as fuel is like, what do I want to experience? Excitement, inspired, collaboration. Okay, well, what do I have to be thinking in order to feel excitement, inspired, collaboration? And that's where you're using it as fuel. And it's pretty magical. I mean, it sounds totally woo-woo, and I'll own it, but just try it. Try it for 7 days, everyone.
Yeah.
Let me know what happens.
It's actually making me wonder how like crazy psycho actors are, because I'm like, oh, I actually chase these feelings in my life because my work is so much better when I'm so like torrential inside and trying to process these feelings. It's like it's part of the daily work.
Yeah, I work for this brilliant
I
person who made us all do improv as marketing executives and strategists. They sent all of us to improv, and it was like, ugh. But same thing, like learning how to feel. I mean, it really, really impacted the quality of the teamwork when we all had a common language.
Definitely.
And letting that empower you and finding connection through that instead of feeling isolated by it. I think people are so scared that they're the only ones feeling a certain way. And it's like, no, we are all in the same space trying to suppress this and feeling alone in it. And it's just not the case.
Right.
Yeah.
I am curious, do you find it more difficult to dive into that kind of work than men versus women, or that one opens up more than the other, or does it just, it depends on the individual?
I think it depends on the individual. Half my clientele is men, and we have some really, really rich and beautiful conversations around feelings. And I think where I get to feel like I'm helping someone change the world is that means that it's one more person who's able to articulate how they're feeling. And then where do they bring that to their spouse, their family, whatever is going on for them. Again, it's one of the reasons why I do the work that I do.
That's great to hear. I mean, it's great to hear that so many men, especially, because it's not to say, I mean, I always find, like, even with my brothers, right? They like, it's like they don't want you to know that they want to have these conversations, but they kind of sneak them in.
Yeah.
So I'll be like, oh, Carly, yeah, I don't know. Do you have like 5 minutes to, just chat about the thing?
That's interesting. I should ask my male clientele if they've shared with people that they're being coached.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
I mean, the ones that are married, I know that the spouse knows, but that's a super interesting question that I should bring back to them just as my own learning. Are they sharing? And I mean, I don't know that you're like, hey, everyone.
Right. I'm working on my feelings.
Right. I'm working on how to be more impactful. Right. I don't know that you share all of that. Right. But I think it's really interesting, because I have to imagine from what they're telling me, their colleagues are commenting on the changes. Their supervisors are commenting on the changes. And I don't know if they're, it's a great question that now I'm super curious and I have to go back and ask them.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know that answer, because in my experience, it's kind of like I'm the secret call. I'm the like, no, nobody's gonna know that I just talked to my sister for 2 hours about something.
Right.
It's kind of like bringing up therapy. Like when I tell people I talk to a therapist, they're like, it's like a weird response. And I'm like, I don't feel weird about that. Like, I think everyone should talk to a therapist.
Oh, please. We could be here at Yankee Stadium between therapy and coaches. Like, please. I mean, I have 3 coaches. Like, they're all for different, they all have a different niche, right? So they all have a different specialty based on what I'm looking for in my career, in my life. So I practice what I preach. I mean, I believe in coaching. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'd be curious to get your opinion on it's been one of the questions I've been pondering a lot lately. So a lot of people that go to coaches, or when you go in, I also think we need to develop a relationship with ourselves. And what we're trying to do is make sure, I'm going to say this for myself. So like, I want to make sure that I know that I trust myself first, before anyone else. I mean, that's still kind of the end goal. And because if I'm not trusting myself, then I'm trusting somebody else. And that feels problematic for me or for anybody else in life. But when we go to coaches, we're looking for room for improvement. So and obviously we're in certain story traps. There's things that we need to change. There are thought patterns. There are, there's plenty of change to be made. So as we start to find that balance between where we do need to improve and where we're also aligning and learning how to trust ourselves and knowing that somebody else doesn't always have, the end all be all best, just processing that coaching in a healthy way to where it doesn't start to be somebody else kind of dictating your life.
It is an amazing. I'm really glad you asked that question, because a good coach does not give you their opinion.
Yeah.
A good coach is showing you your mind.
Yeah. It's like a good therapist.
I'm going to ask you a million questions, and it's going to be variations on like, why is that? So, like really digging into why you're doing it. Where I do give opinion is a lot of my coaching clients have also hired me for the strategy in their business.
That's a consultant.
They're clear that I'm your consultant. I'm your marketing strategist, and take my opinion or not, but there's a safety there because we're not getting into your internal psyche. We're talking about which logo looks better.
Exactly.
So for anyone listening, a good coach is not giving you advice. This is not therapy. It's coaching. We're here to show you your mind. And as you wish to change your mind to have different results, we're here to hold you accountable to the things that you've said you want to do.
Right.
And we're holding you accountable. I mean, I'm sure I annoy my clients because I remember everything. I annoy my husband for the same reason. Like, I remember everything.
Not what you said.
I'm holding you accountable to, you told me you wanted that goal. So why are you micro quitting on yourself? Why are you giving up? Right? Yeah. Super, super powerful.
What an incredible opportunity to approach a marketing and strategy project with the alignment of the coaching. It's like a perfect storm.
It really is, because if you, the person, are involved in the brand in some way, whether you're the face of the brand or the culture of the brand, or you're the head of the company, and therefore the companies have climates and cultures, right? Your culture is always staying, your climate's going to change based on what's going on. But if you're the face of that, it's really important to, again, be clear from a coach and then use that so that it's really authentic. Otherwise, you're creating something that feels like you bought it off the shelf, or it feels like it could fit more than one brand, then it's not authentic to you.
No.
I love that.
Switching gears a little bit. If we start thinking about, because I don't know, maybe if we went through this when I dropped off, let me know. I don't want it to be redundant. I have no idea what happened. But just be interested in kind of hearing your experience and thoughts on the female journey on women in tech and bringing more women, empowering, as we're talking about empowering and what stories and obstacles get in our way, and the fact that our numbers are still severely skewed when it comes to women in the tech industry. So what is your opinion? What are some of your thoughts on this? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I'll come by saying that for me personally, I didn't experience that. I've mostly had male bosses, and they have been nothing but champions. That also comes to my compensation. I mean, I remember one particular boss being like, Griffin, I ain't buying you on sale. So this is what I'm paying you because I'm practicing, right? And I was like, oh, okay. So I personally didn't have that. But at a certain point, I was senior enough to see the numbers. And I did see, I don't think from my experience, I don't think anyone was like, oh, you're a female, I'm going to pay you this. Oh, you're a male, I'm going to pay you that. Like, I don't think that's a reality. What I did notice a lot is when colleagues would come to me for raises or to be considered for promotion, I did often stop the conversation and coach the woman and be like, okay, let's think about how you're asking. Let's talk about how your contribution and your compensation are incongruent. And everything is about value. So show the value you've created and that I should pay for that value, right? And then that gives me, I mean, I always believed in them, but it just gave me the extra fodder to go fight. I mean, not fight, but you had to go to finance. There's only so much money going around, right? So it gave me the ability then to be like, this person has contributed this value. They were able to increase either revenue or sales or client satisfaction in some way, because again, it's always that value. I mean, creating value is how we create money. So create a lot of value and you get money. So from the money side of things, that's sort of my opinion there. From the rest of it, I feel like it's finding champions along the way, where whether it's another man or another woman as you're in the company, how are you finding people internally or externally to be your champion? It's asking people for mentorship. Again, mentorship is reciprocity. So you want to be able to surprise something to that individual who's mentoring you as much as you're being mentored. And if you think about some of the pairings, Gen Z, Gen Y being super tech focused. And if there's an older Gen X or a boomer that's not as savvy, there can be a beautiful reciprocity there. And you're finding sort of that champion. You're teaching them, like, what is TikTok, right? and at the same time, they're giving you sort of the same rules are going to apply, because it's people and relationships and business, and being able to tap into the wisdom of some of those sages is a really an awesome way to kind of balance that championship. So yeah, that's at least from what I've seen.
That idea of value, I think about this obviously a lot as artists. I've had abundance issues when it comes to money personally. That's been one of my blocks for a long time, because I never thought of the arts. I loved what I did. So it's kind of the things that came easy to me and the things that I love. I never, been to therapists, gone through these stories, but I do find now, as I'm working through them and meet other women as well, where sometimes there is a little bit of that self-worth or understanding your value and understanding how to translate that into numbers. And that for sure, it's a tough conversation that I find is much harder for women generally than it is for men.
Yeah. I think you have to bifurcate it, right? So you have value in what is the value I can create. And that is, I can get this done on time, faster, quicker, better, smarter, right? I create value that ends in some sort of measurable result. Increase client satisfaction, increase sales, increase revenue, or from a productivity standpoint, right? You did more for less or more for the same, and you were able to figure that out, right? So there's the value you're creating. There's a difference then between the value of yourself. And that's one of the things that I do work with my clients on, of really being able to get clear in value. And it does come from understanding strengths, skills, competencies. There are relatively inexpensive, the Clifton Strength Finder, it used to be called, it's part of Gallup. That's an excellent tool. It's, I think, in the $50 to $70 range. I don't actually recall, but it's an excellent tool to take that test and get clear from a third party, like, based on your brain, the questions you answer, these are the things that you're strong in. If you do decide to do that, I would say that I would buy the full, because they only give you your top 5 strengths. But it's really interesting to see your next 5. There could be 1 point difference. And that's where you start knowing your value, right? So for me, when I've done those things, I always come up as the visionary. I have this ability when I work with CEOs, I'm able to see around the corner. I already know, you said that. Okay. I don't care about all the steps in between. That makes me want to kill myself. You're gonna hire someone else for that. But I am your visionary. I'm your futurist. And I'm like, okay, that's where you need to go. That's enormous value. It's one of the reasons why CEOs and senior leaders have hired me, because I can see what they can't see. Yeah. And I can do it in a way that you're going to feel good. I'm going to raise your sights. I'm going to raise your feel. Those are the values that I bring to the table, right? That's different. Again, it's the bifurcation of the double words of value, right? Value you create, value you bring.
That's great. Yeah.
Well, and being able to speak that truth it's something that's taken me years to be able to say, especially in the arts, in such a field where your validation comes from other people's opinions, but certainly across the board in industries, is being able to say, this is my skill set, this is what I'm good at, and this is why I deserve the chance. And then I will work hard in that role, and I will show you, I'll prove to you. But, you know, versus being more timid and being unsure or uncertain of if I deserve that role and if I'm good enough and if I can. And changing that mindset to say to the strength has actually helped me accomplish those things probably better than I would have. Same skill sets, but the confidence and the strength to say yes, has allowed me to do that more thoroughly and better and more productive.
And I think when we, so one of the tools I use is like, what is your outrageous self concept, right?
I love it.
How big, when I say obnoxious, I don't mean offensive, but just like, what? Like, how big can you get your self compass? Like, you know, I'm the next Oprah, or, you know, whatever your thing is. And then if you start living from that space, you're obviously never going to be to that level, right? But it helps you in the confidence of where you are. And it's like, what would your future self say, right? So if you could look 6 months forward, and after you already got the audition, that self of you is going to say, like, keep up, keep showing up, keep practicing, keep doing. You need to then think about those things, those feelings, that excitement, that collaboration, that inspiration, and bring it to where you are today. Because your best thinking got you to where you are. So in order to go there, you need to mentally go there, think how you feel when you have it, and then bring it back today. Because I don't want you creating from where you are today, because where you are today isn't that role. I want you creating from that future space. Again, it's a little heady, but it works.
Yeah, it's great. One of the shifts too that I recently was looking at is taking it even from, because I've always been very visual and thinking space of, you know, what's that future vision? Where do you really want to be? But I've found what you're speaking about too is that internal alignment is very feeling based. So instead of focusing on what it necessarily, you can use looks, what it looks like to inspire you, but what does it feel like? And when you start to experience that and start to feel that space now, today,
yes,
then it's growing from the right source within you. But it gets back to those feelings. You got to feel them. You got to let your body feel them.
The fun is, it's like, if I say to you, think of your most favorite vacation and how did you feel, right? So I think about a moment I felt so much joy and inspiration by the beauty that we were seeing, right? So I can think on purpose. I can turn that on right away. So think about something that really inspired you, or, you know, a holiday that you felt so much love and appreciation for things. You know how to turn that on right now by calling up that memory. Do it on purpose. Bring it. That's a way of using it, of being like, how do I take that and come from that place? And that's how you get to use feelings as fuel. Because when I'm acting from inspiration, joy, and love, my output is totally different than if I'm closed, cranky, and like discouraged.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, such a
Jill,
nice
how did
conversation.
you, I can't let go of this thing that you said earlier, which is that you have 3 coaches, which I just think is so, so inspiring, because, you know, you always think, like, I would look to you and think, she's got all the answers. If someone was interested in getting into this kind of work or moved by this kind of work, where do you start? How did you find your mentors and your leaders that brought you into this space?
Yeah, that's a great question. I started by just reading a lot, you know, a mixture of actual books. And then, of course, you know, Googling and following around for different people. And I would really follow someone for a while, because you want to make sure you're aligned. If you're going to use somebody as a coach, you want to make sure that, like, you're not going to agree with everything, but you want to make sure that you know that you can feel completely vulnerable with them, and that they're going to hold space and keep that safe, and of the utmost confidence, that, like, you want to make sure you have that. So I would follow different people and see who speaks to you. And then I find most coaches offer some sort of, I'll say, invitation to Sometimes they charge for it. Sometimes you can, just make an appointment with someone and see if you're a fit. Another way to do it is many coaches offer group coaching programs, which does a few things. One, you're sharing the cost, all right, with a couple of other people. But what it also does is we learn from other people and we learn from modeling. And sometimes when we're on the hot seat being coached, we can't absorb all of it. But if I watch you, right, we go back to everyone has the same kind of issues of status, money, and time. So if I watch you being coached, I'm like, oh my God, I think the same thing. And it helps me too. So group coaching is another way. One-on-one is the best because you get the personal attention,
Right.
but for some people that, they may feel best in starting in a group coaching standpoint.
Yeah.
And you have a group coaching session coming up this summer, right?
I do. If anyone's interested, they can go to my website under coaching. There's a group coaching. You can sign up to be the first in the know. Really excited about, I've been working on it for quite some time, and getting to launch that has been really, really exciting.
Oh,
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So cool.
Thank you.
So nice.
And then, of course, I see right now, I'm seeing people one-on-one. So you can always do that too.
Excellent.
Amazing.
Well, should we
maybe pop in and see if
Yeah.
we've got any questions here?
Yeah.
Looks like we've got one. Can you describe the difference between mental health and mental disorders? What are some common mental health issues that people may not be aware of?
So I'm a coach, not a therapist. So I would leave that to those experts. Again, that is not coaching. Coaching, again, is showing you your brain. That is way out of my scope. So unfortunately, I cannot answer that. I can't ethically answer that question. It's not my area. It's not my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. Well, is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with? Any plugs or reminders or comments on the state of the world in this moment? Or that's a broad question, but
yeah, no,
good one.
I appreciate that opportunity. What I would say is we're in the back half of this year, and it's not too late to set some goals for yourself. Whatever those are, you can share them, you can not share them. But remember, goals are not just about achieving the goal. It's about who you become in the process of strengthening yourself to do the goal, and who you unbecome. And it's not too late. You have it's 6 months until the end of the year. So if you're calendar oriented and you're like, I want to achieve things for 2020, that would be one thing that I would think about, is really think about goals.
I love it.
Yeah.
Inspiring, especially because this year has felt like such a whirlwind of feelings and emotions. A lot to process. We do have
another question.
Yeah.
So my best advice for sustaining success is work your brain, is get clear in what you're thinking every day. Find, ideally, 5-10 minutes in the morning, write down all the thoughts in your head. At first, you're going to be like, why is this woman making me do this? And you're going to be like, I have laundry, I've got food shopping, I hate my boss, right?
I don't like writing these notes.
At some point, you're going to start, and you're going to watch that. For sustainable success, it is vitally important to be watching your brain and watching your brain grow. The only way to do it is to do the work.
Love it. Thank you for saying
that. Actually, never read that or heard that. I love hearing that out loud. It's a great point.
Yeah.
Great.
Watch your brain.
Watch your brain.
We cannot say thank you enough. This has been so incredible and inspiring. Thank you for your time today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Good.
All right. Lots of love, ladies.
You too. Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Good luck. Wow.
Oh, that's right. It's on us now. Yeah. I'm still processing all of that. Well, that was a wonderful show. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And again, this is the Beta in Real Talks. I'm going to have to find my Beta in Real Talks, which is every Wednesday at 3. We had Jill Griffin today. You can connect with her. We'll put some of her links in this video so that you can find them in the comments.
Absolutely. I'm Adriana Leonard. I'm an actor, producer, and founder of Peanut Productions. You can find everything about me at adrianaleonard.com.
And I'm Carly Marcel. I'm a producer, speaker, and founder of the Machu Team Network, an association empowering change agents to become unstoppable, thriving humanity leaders. And you can find out more at carlymarcel.com.
Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Great. This episode was also made possible by the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship, 2112 Incubator, Project 44, Peanut Productions, and the Machu Team Network.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.